In the shift from hunter-gatherers to horticulture to agriculture to city dwellers, we've talked about how the relationship with each other shifted, how the relationship with the habitat shifted, and would you talk now about how the relationship to the alternate reality shifted?
Right. You discover that when you get to agriculture, you have, again, the religious altered state, the religious trance, and you have the alternate reality, in God we trust, or something like that, right? But when the two come in contact, in agriculture, what happens is grace or blessing rains down. It doesn't produce any empowerment. So curiously, the agriculturalist who finds himself the ruler of all things, the crown of creation, is really a dispossessed person. When you get to the city dweller, there you've got the ultimate disposition, being dispossessed. And the alternate reality, well, yes, at least lip service is given to it. After all, we put on our coin, in God we trust, right? God is not located in ordinary reality. No matter how you twist it, he is someplace else. But when these two come in contact, you get neither empowerment, nor do you get grace or blessing. You get symbols. The cross, one of the most important Christian symbols, the crown of thorns, and so forth. If you mention these, then you can be sure that the person you're talking to knows what it is you're talking about. In other words, it's a tool for communication. Of course, that is the ultimate loss of access to the alternate reality. Actually, if we transfer everything that we get from there into a tool for communication.
And that brings us to the discussion of ecstasy as a neurophysiological state.
As so often, people see things and they don't know what they're seeing. In that same article, for example, Laura Marshall's article, the Bushmen tell you, the medicine boils up in your body. In other words, there's something physical going on. You can't make a sudden loud noise because then the medicine disappears. In other words, a physical change is there and it is fragile, it can be disruptive, it's a physical process. I had to get at it differently because I didn't have a Bushman to teach me. I didn't even know this material when I was beginning to work. My entrance into the understanding that there were physiological changes in the body in addition to a change of consciousness came from my analysis of soundtrack of people speaking in tongues, and having done so much work with medical literature as a professional multilingual translator, those regularities that I heard as superimposed elements, not the syllables themselves, but what was happening above. I wouldn't have seen that except I was a modern, freshly trained linguist. Those were so regular that they could not be but physiological. And that alerted me to the fact that religious experience always has two sides. That there is the change in the body, and then this opens the biological door to the perception of the alternate reality. Those people all out there all knew that, but we didn't. And in our hubris, we thought we had found the stone of the wise, and we thought we knew it all. And we are discovering more and more how much they know and how much we did not know. And then I continued doing research. I was very curious, what are these physiological changes? And I did experiments with students, trying to figure out what changes in their body after doing a lot of field work with people actually in trance in the Pentecostal movement, and then discovering that there is no causal relationship between the changes in the body and the religious experience. And it took a lot of blood and tears until I finally understood that unless the physical change is accompanied by the right ritual, there will be no religious experience.
You just introduced some concepts that you use very matter-of-factly. For instance, the word trance. Would you talk about that a little bit?
So what you're asking me there is what happens in the body. We know from laboratory experiments, which are discussed in detail in my various publications, that you have a change in the brainwave pattern. If you determine the brainwave, the electrical activity in the brain by alternating current, you find that during a religious trance induced by rhythmic stimulation, you have the high amplitude, low frequency theta waves. If you do EEG studies with direct current, you find in addition that there is a tremendous increase in the negative potential of the neocortex. You have changes in the blood serum that involve the lowering of the stressors and the increase or the arising of the beta endorphin, which is the physical basis for the sweetness of joy, the euphoria. You have a decrease in blood pressure and an increase in the pulse, which under ordinary circumstances happens only if you're bleeding to death or you are in some other very serious crisis. And the entire picture is one of paradoxical movement and counter movement, which is fantastic to watch in a good computer program, because it starts with the onset of the stimulation and it is over by the end of the stimulation. And very beautifully, the only thing that remains with us after this physical arousal, if it is combined with the proper religious ritual, is the endorphin. And the joy stays with us to my observation, sometimes as long as a week. All of a sudden you say, oh, how sad, now it's over. Now it's time to do another trance. Now the ritual, of course, is of the essence. And the ritual is different according to societal type. There are many different ways in which the religious altered state can be induced, the religious trance. One of the most widely spread is rhythmic stimulation, but there are also other ways in which that can happen.
You just used the word for the joy that lingers after the religious experience. And I was wondering if you would talk about, now we talked about trance from a physiological standpoint, would you now add the thread of ecstasy and talk about ecstasy and trance and those two concepts? And
I'm using the term a little bit differently. I'm talking about the religious trance as the change in the body that you absolutely have to have, or you won't have a religious experience. Religious experience now being defined as entrance into the alternate reality, into that other dimension of reality where the spirits live, where everything is sacred. Ecstasy popularly refers to the experience. In order to get out of that bind so that people will understand what it is I'm talking about, I usually say ecstasy is the cover term, which includes both the biological change and the experience. And the experience proper is the entrance into the alternate reality. And that is different according to societal type. The hunters, gatherers use the changes in the body for spirit journeys, for divination, for healing, very importantly for healing, because it seems that our bodies radiate whatever it is we're engendering when we are in a religious trance, and that is healing for others. The horticulturalists are pretty much along those lines, except horticulturalists are on a sliding scale. Some of them use a lot of gardens and others use very little gardens. So those that use a lot of gardens are getting closer to agriculture. In agriculture, you have the use of the religious trance for visions, but principally for possession, which can be positive or negative. In the typical nomadic pastoralist, you have a very interesting split in functions. The men do the sacrifice, and the women very often are horticulturalists, and the women have the spirit possession, and that is usually a wonderful folk festival where the women come, and yes, they are possessed by a spirit, and they are dancing, and they have to be taken care of, and they sit on a cushion and wait until the spirit maybe leaves them or maybe not. So that's a very distinct separation of worlds in the nomadic pastoralist scene, where the women still have access. And really, I don't have any data, I suspect, but I cannot prove it, that possibly the men, when they bring a sacrifice, also enter into the altered state of consciousness. But there is absolutely no data about that, except some data about North Africa, which I'm not that familiar with.